Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So as you can see, I have switched out my Halloween candy corns for some Christmas lights, Christmas cheer. And I just couldn't help myself. They're battery operated, so I'll have to show you what they look like at night. You can change the way they flash. I'm just so excited. You know, it really is the little things, right? But I put them up and I tried them different ways, and it was like when I'm sitting here, I was practicing before I started my video, and I realized that when I'm sitting here talking with you, the only thing you see are these two yellow lights. It's like almost looks like horns, right? Which we're going to talk about actually today. But yes, I have hopefully a really interesting presentation for you. I think it's interesting, obviously, but I hope you find it so as well. We're going to be talking about demons, and we're going to be relating that to psychology and spirituality, and kind of just feel our way through that. I actually bought this book because it was referenced in this other book I have, which is way down on my floorboard, but I've shared it with y'all before. It's my large book on symbols, and I had looked something up, and it had referenced this book. You ever find those books that are really almost worth purchasing only for the references, the list of references? It's like, it's valuable even if it's just for that. I love those kind of books, those resources, right? Just that are serving literally as a list of more resources. What more can you ask for? It's like there's literally not enough time in the day to get to everything you want to get to. When you have that truth-seeking heart, you know what I mean? When you just you get excited to learn new things. But this book, I have not officially started it yet. I've just flipped through, and I really like it because the way it's organized is that you know, there's chapters that have an overarching theme, but within those chapters are these little sections that can stand alone on their own, and that's cool. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be looking at, if you have this book, the paperback anyway, it's going to be on page 116 to 117. It's going to be talking about Edmund Bergler and the self-damaging demon, or I don't know how to pronounce this. It's spelled, you know, sometimes demon is D-A-I-M-O-N. So this actually says Edmund Bergler and the self-damaging demonian. So it's got I-O-N at the end, which is really interesting. But we're not going to jump right into it at the start of the video. I just want to let you know what we're going to be referencing today, because it's talking about an aspect within our own psyche that serves to self-sabotage. So it's kind of like that spirit, that demonic spirit that seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, right? So we're going to be talking about that. But on the brighter side of things, all the stores have all their Christmas stuff out, like I was saying. And I bought this too. Isn't he just the cutest? Or really, I think it's more of a she. I don't know. But she's going to be riding with me in my Jeep up here with my duckies on my dash, just to bring a little cheer, you know. So it's definitely a sign of the times that Christmas is near. I don't know if you guys have ever worked retail. I did in my early 20s for several years, and I would be so sick of the holiday music because we would start it so early. And this was back in the day when we actually had like a tape player in the back of the store, and we'd have like 2 tapes full of music, you know, from corporate. We would have to switch them out, so you would literally have to just hear the same stuff over and over. But truly, I just love the feeling of the season. Obviously, as a spiritual person, I know what it's really about, and I honor it as such first and foremost. But just in general, regardless of your beliefs, I think that I hope that, anyways, that you can enjoy the season and just and find ways to see it through the eyes of a child, you know, with wonder and curiosity and imagination, and just try to find joy in the little things. You know, I always advise that for all of us, right? So, hope you have just a little bit of happiness you can tuck away, that you can look at every day, whether it's in your Jeep, your car, whatever you have, your apartment, your home, your studio, whatever it is. And so, because truly life can get very heavy, as we know. And anytime we can have the eyes to see those little sparks that come from the numinous realm, right? The greater, higher realm that serve to kind of, they serve like manna, you know, to feed our faith and our hope, you know, to keep that alive through the tough times. I just hope that you have the eyes to see those things, those little things, you know, just little signs that come from above, I feel like. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to get my notebook. I'm almost finished with this notebook. I'm going to have to go buy me a new one. But, yeah, so the theme today is the concept of self-sabotaging, how otherworldly or spiritual influences play a part in that. And I just want to open with a quote from a really great movie, and I've referenced it before. If you haven't seen it, I'm just going to mention it again. It's called The Usual Suspects. It's got Kevin Spacey in it, and just a great cast in general, I feel like. And you can learn a lot from that movie, because what plays out is this quote that comes from this movie, which is, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist." And, you know, if you think about it, that's the same tactic that is used by a psychological abuser. It's the same tactic, because they make you think that that everything you're doing is on your own accord and your own free will, when it's not. They are actually serving as the hidden hand, you know, the one pulling the strings. And so they're the ones in control, but you think that you're in control, but you're not. And I feel like there's so many things that can be exploited in us to allow this dynamic to happen and for us to not see it. I think that if we have wounds in particular from our past, they can exploit that, like our feelings about whatever happened to us. If we have some really strong feelings about past situations or people in our past or whatever it is, they can kind of jump on that bandwagon, that emotional bandwagon with us, and perpetuate those feelings like, yeah, that's awful. Let's you know, let's band together and fight this awful force over here together. And what they're really doing is they're imprisoning you and entangling you to be trapped or entangled with them. And they're the ones perpetuating this, making you think that they're on your side against this other group of people, be it like all women or all men or just any kind of group at all. You see what I'm saying? You have to really be careful to again have the eyes to see these little signs that indicate, oh my gosh, this whole time I thought that this person was for me, and they're not. They're actually keeping me stuck and keeping me from freedom. Anybody who truly loves you may desire to spend time with you, and even may desire a friendship or more with you, but they're not going to keep you stuck. They're not going to want to control you. They're going to want to see you flourish and blossom and live unrestricted. That's how I view it. That's how I view true love. True love is not selfish. So I just wanted to put that out there. I felt called to open with that. So many things that can be exploited. Fear and even our kindness and our giving nature, but also old wounds, you know, and the feelings about those old hurtful experiences. They can be exploited by means of perpetuating that and stoking the fire and making you feel like you're justified in keeping that I forget what it's called. I'm missing the term. I'll drop it down here if I think of it. But it's like keeping that going inside of you, and it becomes an us versus them kind of trap that you don't see as a trap. So, you know, the devil's slick, whatever you want to call him. This psychic force at work and controlling people. This malevolence, however you want to, whatever lens you want to use to view it. And it's just my desire to truly help all of us stay, you know, fully aware of all these different traps. Because I want, you know, ideally all of us to be free in that manner and to feel peace because of that. You know, life's never just going to be consistently good. There's always going to be trials and tribulations and you know, possibly I guess spiritual tests to see, like, you know, which path are you going to take at this particular threshold. But I do think that there can be this constant in our life. Again, when I reference that cord or that string or that lifeline, that's important. And but the fog is real. The brain fog, the mind fog, the confusion is real. And on that note, I want to mention 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33, you know, where it says, God is the author of peace and not confusion. So here we see this juxtaposition of peace and confusion as being these two, you know, polar opposites. So, and we know that with psychological abuse, that's what they do. These people exploit confusion. So, and they add to it and cause it and all that other stuff, right? So let me share this with you all. So I was reading, it's really kind of a short section. I think I'll probably read most of it, if not all of it, to you. But I was looking at the header of this section, which I read to you earlier, and that word, demon, which is spelled D-A-I-M-O-N, and I looked it up in the online etymology dictionary, and it says, as a noun, it means a lesser god, a guiding spirit, and then a tutelary, T-U-T-E-L-A-R-Y, tutelary deity, which means a guardian deity. And then, of course, from the 1200s, an evil spirit. So, yeah, that's certainly the way I view this. But I like how it goes a step further beyond just like an evil spirit, you know, or a lesser god, to say literally a guardian and or a guiding spirit. In other words, they have the capacity for influence, which the Bible talks all about, right? If you believe in that. But the definition of that term right there is related to this influencing power that guides us. Again, seeking to take that place of the Holy Spirit, which will guide us for good, for the good of ourselves and others, right? And then also, the root of, the Proto-Indo-European root of demon, D-A-I-M-O-N, is divider and provider of destinies or fortunes. So here again, we see the spirit of division, okay? Again, it's that us versus them mentality. So, yes, that's what this spirit seeks to do, right? So, in reading this section, it mentions Socrates, specifically the demon star from 1895 is called Algol, A-L-G-O-L. So I looked that up, and it means the variable star, Algol, A-L-G-O-L, the variable star, which is Beta Persei, P-E-R-S-E-I, which is in the constellation Perseus, right? From the late 14th century, it literally means the demon. So, and then just an interesting side note, did you know that now that we know the root of, or the meaning of Algol, think about the fact that the language that our computers use is called algorithms. And then so you have rhythm. Remember, we were talking about, you know, playing the flute, you know, to deceive and create these other vibrational frequencies that entangle people and mess with their minds and hypnotize them, right? Which is a legitimate, real thing that happens in psychological abuse, brainwashing and hypnotism. It's real. But yeah, I found that really interesting, that literally Algol means the demon. And so if you think about algorithm and how it's a computer language, I don't know, it's kind of weird, you know. I'm personally thankful for the internet, and You can certainly use it for good or bad, I guess, but it's, I'll share this. My grandmother, you know, I'm very old school and never stepped foot on the internet. You know, she, the first thing she saw was the fact that it was the World Wide Web, www, and, you know, and if you look at that in Roman numerals, it's kind of like a V and an I together, like, which would be 6. So, you know, I know there's a lot of conspiracies out there with, you know, it meaning the number of the beast or whatnot, but I just, you know, she really wasn't, she didn't have that kind of mindset, you know, with conspiracy. She was just observant. And so it caught my attention when she mentioned that. So, but yeah, when I found that with Algol, and then I saw the computer language, and that's a root part of algorithm, it kind of caught my attention, to be honest. So, but I love how, and I haven't taken the time. I think we need to be careful to say have time versus take time, right? But I haven't taken the time because it's really all about priorities and how you spend your time, right? I haven't taken the time to really deep dive into the correlations and connections between myth and fairy tale and folklore and the stars, but they are related somehow. And so I thought that was really interesting too when it's talking about the constellation Perseus. So I wanted to mention that in case you have interest to go and do some research. But you know, it's historically recorded throughout myth and folklore and fairy tales, you know, that the myths themselves are related to the stars. And so, which reminds me of the saying, as above, so below, you know. And then if you look at some of these stars and planets and comets and how they seem to have horns at times, it's just, it's really interesting, isn't it? It is to me. So, but I researched a little bit further, since we're talking about demons today. You know, Lucifer, that name meant originally, as far as my limited research, I'll say that, right? I'm certainly not an expert, but it meant the light bringer, or light bearing, or the dawn bringer, and it was associated with, or maybe still is, the morning appearances of the planet Venus, right? And then it said, it was recorded in my research, that the Latin name Lucifer subsequently was absorbed into Christianity as a name for the devil. So it's almost like maybe it wasn't originally the true name of the devil, but it just kind of morphed into that. And that's also interesting to see how some religions bleed over into others, and how some traditions say there's blurred boundaries essentially there. And so that's really interesting. And then of course, somewhere in my research, I was brought to the name Samael, S-A-M-A-E-L, right? So that's just a little breadcrumb if you want to take that and research that. My understanding is, it's said that although he condones the sins of man, he remains one of God's servants, almost like a trickster archetype, right? Which, you know, this book is subtitled Archetypes, right? Archetypal defenses of the personal spirit. So these archetypes help us to comprehend things. When we talk about spirituality, you know, it's your choice to take it as literal, a real thing, like an actual other dimension and realm, or is it symbolic and just simply meant to serve as, you know, another avenue for us to understand the human psyche on the scientific, you know, level. That's for you to decide, right? But I thought that name was interesting, and what it stands for. So it came across to me, like I said, like a trickster archetype, right? And he is associated with Mars, the left side, the north, and Tuesdays. I was like, wow. So then, you know, my mind starts clicking about, you know, the book Tuesdays with Morrie, and, you know, what's the meaning there. And I started to research the name Morrie, but I didn't have time. It's just, you know, so interesting. Again, whether a person intends for there to be symbolism in, you know, a book title or whatever it is or not, I feel like there's still this greater underlying collective consciousness that comes through us. It's spiritual. It's this other layer. This is my belief, right? That it's operating unconsciously through us. Which is how certain outcomes can work out, and they seem like they're miracles to us, because there's this other force at work, you know, around us and through us. It's not that we're separate from it. But I just thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, I did look up Tuesday. If you look up the meaning of the days of the week, that right there is another thing you can do in your spare time if you have interest. Monday, I found to mean the day of the moon. Tuesday, which I mentioned, was God of the sky. Also, the war god and Mars. Wednesday's related to Woden's day. Or another name would be Odin, right? Just a huge figure in mythology. And then it goes on from there. Thursday, associated with thunder, and Thor's day and Jupiter. I could go on and on. So I just wanted to put that in there for you if you have interest to take and research. So, so let me go ahead and dive in to reading this section for you all. And then we'll go from there, okay? So, again, this section on page 116, if you have the book, is called Edmund Burglar and the Self-Damaging Daemonian, I guess. So, it says, it opens with an introduction to this guy, which was a student of Freud, okay? And it says, perhaps no one developed the theory of psychic masochism, yes, so thoroughly, right? Which, in my research, is essentially related to someone who derives joy from pain. Okay, you may already know that, but I just wanted to confirm that when I looked it up for myself. But yeah, so it's kind of like what causes this self-sabotage, you know? In other words, wanting to perpetuate something within one's own life, and I guess it would extend to others as well, right? That is bad, and they get joy from perpetuating that somehow. And of course, there can be other layers to this regarding, you know, one's sexuality and things like that. It can be, you know, present in a lot of different ways, but we're not going to go down that road in this message. But he talks about an idea. It says his idea that self-damage by a sadistic superego was the core of all neuroses, making it far more serious than than other investigators had recognized. And so it says Burglar's superego lacks benevolence altogether. It is, in fact, a monster, a demonic internal agency bent on a campaign of sheer torture and lifelong abuse of the helpless, masochistic ego. So that's heavy, right? And this really is a heavy book. But this was really interesting for me to read. So I'm just going to dive in a little bit further, and then we'll expand on it, okay? So he's talking about a developmental theory, which has elements of, it says, the Kleinian idea of the infant's original condition. It says, which Burglar says is one of magical omnipotence. This is kind of like if you think about children and how they're so egocentric. They are kind of like little narcissists just by nature because of that early developmental stage. It's just normal for kids, right? So it's kind of starting out there and describing it as a state of magical omnipotence or infantile megalomania, demanding instantaneous gratification, right? We know that children are not patient whatsoever. And then, of course, we know that when love is defined in the Bible, it's defined as, you know, being patient as well. So this is part of that maturity, not just maturity in character, but spiritual as well. And so, yeah, it talks about, this reminds me of narcissists in particular, like adults, right? When this infantile wish runs into realities, no, the infant experiences a frustration which leads to unbounded rage, right? A rage fit. Aggression that cannot find adequate expression owing to the infant's undeveloped motoric equipment. In other words, children are not equipped to handle these emotions that you know, just totally overtake them, right? And then it talks about the aggression first being projected outside of the self and attributed to the bad mother, right? But then it boomerangs against the ego, becoming incorporated in a sadistic superego which mercilessly attacks the self from within. Such an interesting mechanism, right? By establishing an inner agency of abuse, the child unconsciously defends its megalomania and self-sufficiency in the face of an environment which seems hostile to its every wish, preferring its own depression to the humiliation of being subject to someone else's will. So this is like a refusal to surrender, okay? And that's causing this depression. I'm reading into this like depression itself becomes the defense mechanism, which is founded in pride and the unwillingness to submit or surrender to another, which we shouldn't as far as another human being, but surrendering to this higher power is where it's at, right? It says the final, this is really interesting, the final stage in this sequence is the libidinization, and I had to look that term up, okay? And it essentially means that the final stage is when it turns into like this pleasure, right? Not just something that's serving one to self-sabotage as a defense mechanism, but it actually, as it continues to get more and more corrupted and sick, it turns into getting joy, right? Again, it could go down the route of sexual joy, gratification, but it could also just simply stand on its own, meaning getting pleasure from something that is manifesting that actual spirit of the devil, which is to kill, steal, and destroy. It's a destructive, right, spirit. The final stage is when there's joy in a person engaging in that spirit of destruction, of self, I would say, and others, and or others, through projection and abuse, okay? So, interesting. The final stage in the sequence is the libidinization of the pain caused by the superego, i.e. its defensive conversion into pleasure. And then it says psychic masochism. Patients with this background will present themselves as innocent victims seeking support, but they are really unconsciously engineering self-damaging situations which they inwardly enjoy. Until they realize this and break the self-destructive pattern, supportive psychotherapy will not help them. This reminds me of my friend. I've mentioned it in the past. I haven't talked to her in years. I really need to get in touch with her. But she mentioned to me one time, she said, you know, I believe that nobody does anything without there being a desire for it to be done, even if it's like unconscious. But she said it a lot quicker and easier than that. I have to expand on everything, unfortunately. Sometimes it's just the way my mind works. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting and related here. So it expands on all this, and it's talking about this ego ideal that a child holds on to. It says, in the ego ideal, the child holds on to its archaic image of perfection and self-glorification, frustrated in reality, but now enshrined in this inner department made up mostly of infantile narcissism. Okay? This ego ideal now becomes a major instrument of torture in the hands of the sadistic superego because the child is always falling short of it. So here we have the spirit of perfectionism, right? Which reminds me of this this false light of you know, the devil that was supposedly the most beautiful angel in heaven. But it was kind of like he had this spirit of perfectionism, and see, it's kind of like this ideal that can never be attained. So there's always this hunger or this thirst for this unattainable level of perfection. If you've ever been entangled with a narcissistic person, it's like that. It's like they hold you to unrealistic standards. They can't just appreciate perfect imperfections, which is God's design, because we're not meant to go it alone in this journey. We're meant to partner with this higher power, because we aren't perfect without God, right? Without His grace. So just really interesting here. And then it goes into talking about Socrates. It says the term, this leads to Bergler's final formulation, the accumulation of cruelty and aggression directed against the ego he calls daemonion, a term adopted from Socrates, who described it in Plato's Apologia as a godlike and demoniacal something, some kind of voice that deters me from things I wish to do, but never gives positive advice. Now, I want to pause here and mention this guy I found online. His name is Jerry Marzinsky. He has researched schizophrenia and worked in psych hospitals for many, many years as a therapist, a psychotherapist, psychologist. I'm not sure the official term related to his credentials, but he's a really interesting person, and he does have a channel on YouTube. But he believes that it truly is spiritual, and that the essentially the industry of psychology is making it not spiritual, and that in itself is perpetuating the issue of demon or demonic oppression. Just something to look into if you have interest, okay? So it says daemonion, or daemonion, says burglar, is a malignant spirit, an internal antagonist with uncanny power. It tricked Socrates into drinking the hemlock by remaining silent when he might have escaped imprisonment. And then I'm just reminded of this spirit, you know, its intention is to keep us divided, right, from the Spirit of God, which brings peace and unity, right? So I wrote, wow, always having the goal to halt, block, or stop the flow, stop life, okay? Prevent you from your full potential, prevent you from the blessings that God has designated for you, which I don't really know that can be, you can be kept apart from that forever. I don't know, maybe free will plays a part there. But yeah, it says, expressed psychoanalytically, daemonion is an internal something which is the individual's own worst enemy, right? It's a cruel jailer and tormentor composed of the child's rebounding aggression. It is always at work in the human being's inner world despite all conscious strivings for happiness and pleasure. So it's undermining people constantly, okay? And it's unidentifiable, okay? And then it says there's just this constant campaign of torture, constantly presenting to the ego ideals, exaggerated infantile claims of all power and grandiose achievements, constantly asking the unchanging question, have you achieved all the aims you promised yourself as a child? If the answer to this question is in the negative, the result is guilt. So if we ever wonder, like, why do I feel guilty when I'm not guilty? It may be this subconscious cyclical process happening within our psyche somewhere back here that's evading our conscious awareness, that it's like this this entity at work, you might say, or this malevolent force or whatever, or malevolent mechanism within one's own psyche, if you want to be scientific and, you know, in alignment with the industry. It's like you're always missing the mark. Never good enough, you might say. Okay? So it's like you feel guilty because you're constantly letting down your inner child, which has these unrealistic expectations, or infantile, right? The spirit of perfectionism. So yeah, let me wrap this section up. It says burglars' idea that the demonic voices of the superego use the ego ideal images to create a more demanding perfectionism, which only further persecutes the ego, finds corroboration in much current clinical literature. And it talks about someone named Marion Woodman from 1982 has attributed most eating disorders to an addiction to perfection. And Sidney Blatt from 1995 has shown persuasively how many contemporary suicides committed by seemingly healthy, accomplished people derive from a form of neurotic perfectionism, in which the self-critical, often overly self-reliant individual is stalked by his own impossible standards of perfection. The harsh, punitive superego is indeed a terrible force in the psyche of men and women across the spectrum of psychological adjustment and maladjustment. So here we see this correlation between the spirit of perfectionism, the spirit of narcissism, this self-sabotage, this agenda of self-sabotage, and how if it's not tended to and corrected and fixed, however you want to spin it, it can become worse and worse and worse over time, even leading to one gaining joy from it. And so, you know, there's certainly, there should be, I feel like, this motivation to want to purge this from one's spirit. It's not from God, I can tell you that, the all-loving God. So let me wrap up with this. Again, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33, God is the author of peace and not confusion. So, you know, we have to be careful and staying conscious of, you know, who is guiding our life, who is the author of our life, right? If we truly do have spiritual influence. I looked up the term confusion, actually, and this was interesting. From circa 1300s, this is, again, the online etymology dictionary. It said to overthrow, right? Confusion, overthrow, ruin, disorder, and shame. Which I had never really put all those things together with confusion. The act of mingling together two or more things or notions properly separate. In other words, things that should be separate are brought together, and they shouldn't be brought together. Now, this is so important and at the core of our message today. I say our, it's my message today, which is really ironic. But it's really this. This is the whole issue here. Okay, I'm gonna go back to that quote I opened with, which is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. Okay, that's the whole issue. So people are identifying with these destructive influences. All right, it's kind of like the Bible talks about guarding our mind and heart, and essentially to observe our thoughts. Well, if it's coming from us, why do we have to observe it? Where's it coming from? You know, it's like, you know, are we allowing them truly to pass through? Or do we have this thought surface that seems totally foreign, and somehow we employ shame and guilt and we latch onto it as truly our own thought? If you really dig into some verses around this, Bible verses around this, we see that thoughts, it seems to imply, these verses seem to imply that these thoughts are really not our own, and that we have to be the guardian of our mind and heart. Okay, and just understand that when something pops up that doesn't feel right, a thought or a feeling, you know, we need to take that as a sign that, you know, it's not coming from us. If it doesn't feel right, if it feels foreign and it's bothersome, that should be a sign that it doesn't belong to us. So why latch on to it and identify it? Identify with it. Identifying with and latching onto or hooking into these emotions or thoughts that are destructive is kind of like what the tie that binds. So people are identifying with these destructive influences, and the problem here is that the current system supports this. Let me just expand on this real quick. Matthew chapter 6 verse 24 says, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. Okay, and let me leave you with this as well. I made so many notes on this. I was looking at Psalms 34 verse 17 says, the righteous cry out. Okay, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. If you look up to cry in the etymology dictionary online from the mid-13th century, it actually means to yell something out and to utter, right? Not to physically cry with tears. But so how, if someone is blaming themselves for these destructive thoughts and feelings, then they're just blaming themselves. And so it doesn't feel logical, or probably wouldn't feel logical, for a person to cry out to God for help to save them from themselves. But if you are catching these things and not hooking into and identifying with these things, but you're struggling with them, which I think we all struggle with them, right? Because we fight not against flesh and blood, but the, you know, principalities, and, you know, so there's these, you know, do we hook into them? Do we not hook into them? Do we identify with them and make them our own, or do we not? Do we stay properly separate from them? Okay, because if we stay separate from them, then we can cry out and ask, you know, for them to go away. Because again, the Bible says to resist the devil and he will flee. Okay, if we don't hook into these negative, destructive forces, then we won't find ourselves one day in a stagnant place where somehow we've become comfortable in our troubles. Okay, so again, Psalms 34:17, the righteous cry out or yell out, right? And the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. To be delivered means to be set free and preserved. So, you know, I was looking up statistics, this website, Statista.com, in 2022, supposedly, it says 31.6% of the world's population, you know, identified as Christians. Well, there were 8 million people globally in 2022. I couldn't even do this on my calculator. it just wouldn't go that far. But I tried other methods, and if I'm right, then that would mean 2,528,000,000. Would you call that many people delusional? Really? Because many people believe in spiritual forces that influence us, you know? And I wonder how many people have or claim to have these spiritual beliefs, but pick and choose what they believe and just call the other parts of it fairy tale, when in reality it's real. And I think that there are layers of the truth as far as it being real. I think a lot of this is spiritual, but I think a lot of what's recorded and documented and prophesied is literal too, and physical with regards to our world. So it's just really interesting to think about. So, you know, John chapter 14 verse 12 says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also." That means you. "And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father." You know, Jesus cast out demons. If we truly believed that verse, "He that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also," well, then that would mean that there would be no need for experts, right? There would be no need for exclusion with regards to authority in all these different fields, okay? Specialized fields, because we would all be empowered, see? So I could expand on this. I've got more notes, but we're already at 42 minutes. I might drop some extended notes down in the description for you all related to this. But essentially, let me say this. Who determines your expertise? Who determines your power? Right? So, you know, Jesus said, "He that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do." But society says you need a license, you know, or you're crazy if you don't conform to established norms, etc., right? I can make an argument for both sides. Just for the sake of debate, I could, right? Because there's always caveats and things like that. I understand that. But, you know, it's up to each of us to determine what's true with regards to these things we're talking about today, especially. Because there's documentation. It doesn't matter what topic you take and you go and you research, you can find documentation to support, you know, different aspects and different sides. So I want to propose that perhaps there's some rational balance to be found. In the end, I want to leave you with the encouragement to have the eyes to see, to seek discernment, okay, to recognize the signs that are sent to you from a higher power and to not dismiss them, to identify and to safeguard your pearls, and mostly to never doubt yourself, your higher self. So I hope that this has been interesting for you. I hope it got the wheels turning. I hope that I've left you with some encouragement. And I just thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. And I hope that you have a beautiful day. And I'll see you again very soon.